The wealthy landlord barely gave a second thought as he signed the eviction notice, forcing the elderly tenant out of her only home. It was business, after all, and he had bigger plans, including impressing his new girlfriend's family at dinner. But when he arrived at their elegant table, his heart stopped cold. Sitting across from him, with a gaze he couldn't escape, was the last person he expected to see. Signing the eviction notice felt like just another task for him. The elderly woman had pleaded with him, her voice shaky as she begged to keep her home. "Please, sir, it's all I have," she said, her eyes welling up. But he brushed her off easily, too focused on his own life to really hear her cries. He didn't even notice her leave, just continued filling out forms at his desk. With the eviction settled, he turned eagerly towards his next business opportunity. He straightened his tie and gave one last look in the mirror before stepping out. This dinner with his girlfriend's family was crucial. He walked in feeling sure of himself and the deals he imagined closing. But the confidence he carried so firmly began to falter as he stepped through the door and saw the familiar face. Sitting at the table was the elderly woman he had just evicted. Her piercing gaze met his, and he felt trapped like a mouse caught in a snare. All the blood rushed from his face as he fumbled to keep his composure. How on earth did she end up here, of all places? The realization of her presence sent a wave of panic through his confidence, shaking him to his core. The landlord shifted awkwardly in his chair, trying to keep his cool. His mind raced, trying to understand her connection to the family. Just then, his girlfriend leaned in with a smile, saying, "Meet my grandmother. She's such a strong, independent woman." He nodded, swallowing hard, wondering just how much she knew about his actions from earlier. He found it hard to meet her eyes across the table. Her eyes never left his, making him feel strangely small in the grand dining room. Even while laughter bubbled around him, the house felt suddenly colder, the air oddly thin. Every bite he took felt forced, every chuckle hollow. Her presence was like a dark cloud, stretching over the evening and raining down a reminder of the wrong he'd done. He couldn't stop glancing at her, feeling like she was watching his every move, like she knew exactly who he was. It was as if his nerves had taken a life of their own, crawling under his skin. Each word he spoke came out shaky, the facade he had carefully put up threatening to crumble with every passing second. After everyone had moved away from the table, he pulled his girlfriend aside. "Hey, I just have to ask, what's your grandmother's background?" he inquired, trying to sound casual. She beamed proudly and started gushing about her grandmother's accomplishments. Her words only added to his growing unease as details about her sharp business sense became more and more apparent. "My grandma has an amazing eye for investments," his girlfriend continued. "She's really protective of our family." His smile was strained, an uneasy feeling settling in his gut. Every sentence was like a new brick in a wall of dread surrounding him. If she made the connection, his carefully curated world could come crashing down in an instant. Realizing the gravity of the situation, he felt a cold sweat break out along his back. He could already see headlines that he wanted to avoid at any cost. If she connected him to the eviction, he was looking at not just personal embarrassment, but professional ruin. His mind raced to find a way to smooth things over, to fix this mess before it spiraled further out of control. He was sure he could handle any situation that came his way, but this was different. The connection between his actions and the woman across the table didn't seem like a big deal at first. However, the more he thought about it, the more he realized the consequences could be serious. He never once considered that this eviction might come back to haunt him in such an unexpected setting. To calm his growing nerves, he decided to make the woman an offer. Through his lawyer, he proposed a cash settlement, hoping to show a semblance of generosity. Perhaps money would fix the problem before it got out of hand. He thought it was a smart move, making sure she didn't have any reason to talk about him or his actions with anyone else. When his lawyer got back to him, the news wasn't good. The elderly woman swiftly turned down his offer without a second thought. Her response was brief, but had a chilling effect. "Your money won't protect you," she warned. It sent a shiver down his spine. He had never heard someone dismiss his wealth so easily, and he was left feeling uneasy. The landlord tried to shake off the feeling of nervousness that seemed to cling to him. He thought, surely she's just an old woman? Why all the fuss? Imagining her as a harmless tenant helped him convince himself that this situation was controllable. There couldn't be much bite behind those words, he concluded. His mind went back to relaxing, telling him he was reading too much into it. Though he put on a brave face, confidence in his power was starting to waver. Doubt crept up slowly, turning each thoughtful pause into more worrying. Could this eviction really cause him problems? Even with his money and influence, he wondered if he might have misjudged. But he brushed those thoughts aside, reassuring himself short-sightedly. He believed he could still control the narrative without too much trouble. At their next lunch together, the elderly lady greeted him with a smile that seemed to hold many secrets. There was an air of quiet confidence about her that was hard to ignore. When her eyes met his, it was almost as if she was letting him know she had more in hand than he could imagine. His mind quietly worried about the possibilities. As dinner unfolded, the elderly woman expertly steered the conversation towards themes of loyalty and true wealth. Her words had a subtle edge to them, seemingly innocent, yet they carried a lot of weight. Each phrase felt like it was aimed directly at him, delivering subtle jabs that only he could interpret. He shifted uncomfortably in his seat, unsure what to make of her veiled comments. The landlord's girlfriend couldn't hold back her admiration, saying, "My grandma's investments are amazing. She's always a step ahead." Praise like that peeled away layers of his bravado, leaving him feeling vulnerable. Her proud words struck him hard, making him realize how little he'd thought of this woman's capabilities. He feared his facade might crumble under this unspoken challenge to his power. His chest felt tight as realization hit him. He'd underestimated her. Anxiety gnawed at him, creating a sinking feeling in the pit of his stomach. What could she be planning? Each smile, each calm sentence hinted at the control she might have. His worry deepened with every moment he spent considering the implications. He looked across the table and saw someone who was much more than he ever imagined. Compelled by desperation, the landlord dug into her past to find something he could use to his advantage. Skimming through reports, he unearthed tales of her modest investments in local charities. Surely, there was something here, he thought. As he combed through the information, he searched tirelessly for a hint of leverage. Yet, none of the details seemed to offer the advantage he desperately needed. After looking into her, he found nothing that would make him worry. Pleased, he told himself stories about how families often exaggerated tales. As he convinced himself that her talent was nothing more than a collection of fading stories, he began to relax. Yet, a part of his mind lingered, slightly restless. Still, he shook it off, believing it was all just business talk and nothing to really lose sleep over. During their next family dinner, the elderly woman made a comment that made him nearly spit out his drink. She casually spoke of acquiring properties near his own portfolio. Surprised, he felt a sudden tightening in his chest. How did she know about those locations? His mind spun with the implications, and he wondered if this was just bragging or something more calculated. He tried to play it cool, pushing down the chaotic fear that raced through him. He laughed it off, attempting to maintain calm, even though her words stuck in his mind. The fear nagged at him, a silent echo in the back of his head. Nighttime didn't bring rest like it used to. Her presence during mealtime became a quiet wave of unease he couldn't shake. Things took a turn when his girlfriend's grandmother requested a chat after dinner. Her invitation was friendly enough, but her eyes were sharp, holding a kind of certainty that left him feeling exposed. People filtered out of the room, leaving him alone with a sense of looming tension. The formality of the moment seemed to underscore the seriousness hidden beneath her wrinkled but fierce gaze. As they stepped into the study, she closed the door with an air that chilled him. The room's atmosphere became thick with silent threats. His eyes fell onto the desk and noticed piles of papers, one of which had his company's name boldly on the cover. The sight of those documents filled him with a fear he couldn't ignore, raising doubts about his sense of control. His thoughts cascaded in turmoil, heart pounding with every revelation he considered in advance. It was apparent she didn't call him in here for a warm chat. What she was about to unveil sent a shiver down his spine. He reminded himself to stay steady, but his mind kept running, trying to anticipate the news she was about to unload, news he wasn't certain he wanted to hear. Just as he felt his nerves could hold no longer, she leaned in. Her expression was a solid block of ice, cool, yet unwavering. It was the kind of gaze that made him feel like the floor was falling away from beneath him. He did his best to seem unbothered, trying to maintain some semblance of control, though he could feel it slipping away with her every gesture. A sly grin crept on her face as she pushed several papers toward him. They revealed a truth he hadn't expected. She owned a massive property empire under another name. The realization hit him like a wave, pulling the ground out from under his careful footing. The quiet threat within those pages loomed large, leaving him speechless in the face of this startling revelation. Her voice cut through the tense air like a sharp knife. "You thought you could just toss me aside?" she whispered, the words laced with power. "Well, now I own your biggest competitor," she stated with a certainty that made his heart drop. Her revelation left him in stunned silence, unable to muster a response in the face of her bold declaration. She continued, her voice lowering to a spine-chilling whisper. "The first property I acquired was the one you so carelessly evicted me from," she said, her words sending a ripple of shock through him. The weight of her actions, undoing his own, struck him hard. Her resolve was clear, and the retribution she hinted at hung heavily between them, leaving a resounding impact in the silent room. As she leaned back with a satisfied smile, her words echoed in his mind. "I'll ruin you, property by property," she promised. Each word stung, creeping into his thoughts, unraveling his once steady facade. His face went pale as cold realization sank in. She had him cornered. The control he once cherished now slipped away, helplessly out of reach. He sat there, frozen, as the truth of her threat settled in. With a calm but commanding presence, she cut him off, unfazed by his sudden turn of pleading. "You made your choices," she said, listing off each callous decision he took. He realized just how closely she had been watching him all along, her eyes like a hawk observing prey. It became clear that she knew every move he made, every careless action. Her awareness was unsettling, and her confidence unshaken. Her words carried weight, emphasizing how her eviction was more than an insult. It felt to her like the final straw. Even as she spoke, He began to see that her actions weren't driven by money, but consequences meant just for him. She made it clear with each calmly delivered sentence that he wasn't simply dealing with retaliation over financial loss. The heart of her motivation was justice she felt was served. As she named each cruel move he made, she explained how she had used his own arrogance to gain advantage. He listened, stunned, as she detailed how she secretly acquired more properties while he blissfully ignored her. Every word she spoke revealed the cleverness behind her actions, turning his ignorance into her opportunity. He was witnessing the unfolding of a plan he never saw coming, all while she kept her cool. Feeling defeated and humiliated, he scrambled for any hope of recourse. "Could we call it even if I return your home?" he offered, his voice tinged with despair. He even suggested going in on a business partnership, a last-ditch effort to find some common ground. His tone was pleading. The scales had tipped against him. Despite the weight of her victory, he clung to optimism of salvaging some arrangement. She stood firm, refusing his offers with steady assurance. "Some actions can't be undone with money or deals," she stated plainly. Her refusal showed unwavering commitment to her course of action. She vowed to keep acquiring his properties without hesitation, her plan relentless and clear. His offers meant nothing to her, and she left no room for redemption, content in her decision to continue her pursuits undeterred. He began to realize just how powerless he had become in this scenario. Watching the firm resolution in her eyes, he knew there was nothing to do but wait as his empire slowly crumbled at her calculated actions. What was once a powerful domain now felt fragile in her capable hands. He was left watching from the sidelines, knowing the tide had turned and left him struggling to keep afloat. As his confidence crumbled, he quietly left the room, understanding fully that her plan was already unfolding. He could feel the grip of control slipping completely away. The world he had built was now shaking at its foundation, each move she made shaking it further. With his back turned, he knew that control was out of reach, and his fate seemed all but sealed in her calculated grip. The months rolled on, and with each passing day, his empire diminished. Multiple properties transferred hands, slipping through his grasp into her company. The painful realization settled in quicker with every new sale, every inch lost. What was once grand and untouchable now faded bit by bit. Her sheer determination paired with his missteps spelled the inevitable. The empire they both recognized was no longer his to command. As words of his downfall spread through the grapevine, his once thriving business started to crumble before his eyes. Conversations in town shifted, whispering about his steep decline. Rumors flowed faster than a spring river. His employees, concerned for their jobs, gossiped in the halls. It was like watching a house of cards fall. There was no stopping it. Socially, he was avoided, the mere shadow of his former proud self. His girlfriend, once his pillar of support, couldn't take it any longer. Disgusted by his reckless actions and inability to own up to his responsibilities, she left. She hadn't signed up for this, she said, walking out the door, leaving him standing there alone. It was a harsh realization, like a bucket of cold water, that he truly was alone now, left with nothing but regrets echoing back to him. Her chilling smile haunted him long after she'd issued her warning. Those words lingered like a ghost in his mind, never fading with time. Nights became sleepless, tormented by vivid dreams of her promise. In daylight, his mind never left their last encounter. Her whispered threats felt like they were locked onto him. The landlord, once bold and enigmatic, was reduced to a mere shadow, entangled in fear and regret. In his office, remnants of his past life surrounded him like ghosts of triumphs long gone. Stacks of papers, reminders of deals once sealed, collected dust on forgotten desktops. He moved through rooms that held echoes of once confident conversations. Desperately, he clung to memories of success, like holding on to fading dreams. Each item was a memento of past achievements, swords now dull in light of recent revelations. Where laughter once filled spacious rooms, now only hollow echoes remained. Friends and colleagues, once frequent visitors, were now strangers in these halls. The silence was deafening, and the only company was that of fleeting memories replaying through his mind. He'd once been at the center of these social circles, a figure in demand. Now, those days were but echoes, leaving behind emptiness with no laughter left to fill. The shrinking of his influence became more apparent with every ignored phone call and unopened mail. He could no longer deny the impact of his decisions, feeling the repercussions stretch beyond personal loss. The clarity of each letter returned unsigned pointed out what couldn't remain hidden. These daily realities exposed how his once unquestioned power had diminished. They were constant reminders of the wide-reaching consequences of choices made with disregard. Looking at the city skyline, he saw his once mighty empire blurred into the distance. Tall buildings now felt like distant mountains, once close, but now unreachable. The offices he once oversaw became cities within walls so far from his grasp. Past victories stood as shadows of achievements now corroded by time and oversight. The horizon reflected their faded glory, a testament to a lone reign once stunningly bold. As the seasons changed, he watched from the sidelines, feeling the chill of lost power in a more bitter winter than before. The once vibrant office now felt like a quiet tomb, echoing with memories of better days. His reputation continued to crumble, becoming folklore of a once great figure reduced to shadows. It was like living in a different world, one where he could see but not touch his past dreams, slipping further away each day. Sitting in his now unadorned office, he recalled the lavish dinners and expensive suits. Those were distant memories, reminders of what was gone. He remembered the feeling of power, the sense of control he used to have. But now, those thoughts were like echoes fading into silence, the laughter at fancy gatherings replaced with a quiet emptiness. Despite the loss, a little voice whispered reminders of the wealth and influence they once held. He avoided the mirror, not wanting to confront the truth staring back at him. The reflection showed a man he barely recognized, someone worn down by choices he couldn't undo. Each glance was like a reminder of his slow decline, a truth he couldn't face. It was easier to turn away, leaving reality out of sight. Avoiding his reflection meant escaping the burden of past mistakes, if only for a moment. Gone were the days filled with meetings and plans. Instead, each day blurred into the next, marked only by quiet breakfast mornings alone. As he sipped coffee, the silence almost tangible. It hung around him like an old coat, unshakable and ever-present. Friends and acquaintances vanished like smoke, leaving him with empty seats and conversations held only in memories. He realized being alone wasn't just physical. It was a feeling that now lingered in every corner. Forced to adapt, he swapped tailored suits for simple shirts, adjusting to a life minus the daily gloss of success. Mornings used to be orchestrated affairs, precise and controlled. Now, they started with the bare essentials: coffee, slippers, and the quiet hum of an otherwise lifeless room. As each day ticked by, he discovered a new routine, one mixed with the bitterness of memories, and faint hope for paths unknown. Somewhere in simpler choices. Life had a new rhythm now, slower and more deliberate. He tried gardening, folding bedding, and arranging books, say, on simple shelves. Each task became a little daily victory, something to mark the day by. These small achievements stood in stark contrast to his past accomplishments, but they carried an odd sense of peace. It was strange, but comforting. The simplicity he had once dismissed now presenting itself as a new chapter. At dusk, he wandered through the garden, the quiet filling his senses as he walked the narrow paths. It was in these silent moments that memories flooded back, the mistakes and regrets replaying in his mind. The air carried a chilly breeze, rolling over him like the past, constant yet oddly meditative. Here, in the twilight, he could reflect, silently acknowledging both the life left behind and the path that lay ahead. One day, while tending to his garden, an old friend appeared at the gate. Their brief greetings carried memories of long-past camaraderie. But his friend noticed the change. No expensive suits, just a simple man and his modest garden. "It's been a while," said his friend, a hint of nostalgia in his voice. They shared stories over tea about the way things were, weaving past triumphs with present lessons, grounding him amidst the chen mist of change. His friend reminded him that life wasn't just measured in assets or power. True wealth was in the moments of joy and the warmth of shared laughter. The conversation opened his eyes, sprouting a small seed of gratitude within him. As they talked, he realized it was these relationships that held real value, not figures on a balance sheet. It was a lesson learned too late, but not unappreciated as they shared stories into the evening. With newfound clarity, he walked his old friend to the gate. They parted with a handshake and a promise to meet again. He watched him depart, feeling lighter somehow, less burdened by the weight of past decisions. His gaze drifted back to his garden, a symbol of modest growth and renewal. For the first time in a long time, the world felt full of possibilities. Each day a chance to walk a new path. Different, but hopeful. His days now began with the gentle chirping of birds outside his window. It felt different, almost refreshing after all that had happened. With each sunrise, he started finding a bit of hope in the little things, like his garden's first bloom. These moments became bright spots in his once dull routine. He'd come to understand that life was no longer a race to the next big deal, but a journey made of meaningful little moments. As he worked in his garden, a friendly voice called out from the sidewalk. It was a new neighbor moving in across the street. Engaging in small talk over the fence, he was reminded of how communities thrive on simple, friendly connections. The chat brought a smile to his face. He offered to help them settle in, finding joy in lending a hand rather than closing a deal. The change of pace was refreshing. He decided to attend a local community event, something he'd have brushed off in the past. Surrounded by laughing children and bustling activity, he felt a sense of belonging that had been missing. Volunteering for small tasks, he found himself drawn into conversations with neighbors, sharing stories and laughs. The sense of community soothed his soul, proving the value of genuine connections beyond business and profits, offering warmth and acceptance he'd long missed. Days filled with simple pleasures brought him comfort he'd never expected. Cooking meals, taking long walks, and enjoying evenings on the porch all became essential parts of his new life. It was a stark contrast to the chasing after wealth he used to know. The rhythm was peaceful, fulfilling, teaching him that joy can stem from a simpler life. He realized he was learning to appreciate moments he'd once overlooked, unlocking a newfound contentment. Reaching out to old friends, he tried mending relationships strained by his old ways. Cautious at first, he was pleasantly surprised when many welcomed him back. Coffee chats and nostalgic talks filled gaps that once seemed insurmountable. Each renewed connection taught him more about forgiveness, the value of humility, and true friendship. Bridging these divides reminded him that relationships were treasures worth more than any portfolio, rekindling aspects of life he thought he'd lost forever. On quieter days, he sifted through old photos and letters, rediscovering memories long forgotten. Each snapshot captured a story, each letter a moment in time. It was a journey of appreciation, tracing the path that had brought him here. These mementos served as gentle reminders of his life's tapestry, laughs and tears woven into the pages of his history. They revealed a deeper understanding of himself, guiding his steps forward into a future more authentic and true. One afternoon, curiosity led him back to the streets where he once held sway. The elite circles, the towering buildings, they now seemed smaller, forgotten echoes of an ambitious past. Wandering those familiar spots, he found peace instead of longing. Absent was the desire to retake that world, replaced by gratitude for where he had been and what he'd overcome. He realized it was no longer his playground, but part of a story he'd grown beyond. Reflections on past mistakes taught him so much. He found lessons in each failure and setback, turning once painful parts into wisdom for the road ahead. With humility, he accepted them, seeing how they shaped him into who he was becoming. These experiences, though difficult, guided him like a compass, urging him to value integrity, compassion, and real wealth, not measured in dollars, but in love and trust. Knowledge gleaned shaped his journey anew. Another day started as any other, yet it felt full of possibilities. Old chapters were closing, and new ones were eagerly waiting to unfold. He stood at a crossroads, yet confident of the path he'd take, a path of sincerity and kindness, devoid of the reckless ambition that once drove him. This shift in mindset embraced potential, not defined by traditional success, but shaped by the values he now held dear, embracing life's journey with renewed hope. He learned to embrace change, to view it as a friend, not a foe. It transformed him, more vibrant than before, weaving new facets into his life's canvas. The losses and gains acted as brush strokes, shaping a masterpiece, one that was uniquely his. With each day, he found joy in the dynamic dance of life. Realizing happiness was a result of embracing growth and change gave him the strength to walk his new path with hope.